Do you struggle with sobriety, depression, or both? Then stick around because in this episode of the Mental Health Toolbox, we're talking all about how strength training can help you stay sober and fight depression with life transformational coach Rob Eastman, also known as the Tattooed Life Coach. So let's go. Rob Eastman has been on the dark side of both addiction and depression. Using his life experiences of overcoming mental health struggles, bullying, addiction, and suicidal ideation, Rob has committed his passion to helping others with deep lessons from his past to empower others through effective programs he has curated for youth, teens, and adults. Rob is a successful entrepreneur and leader in the community who prepares others with the tools they need to stand and fight against their own battles in life. Rob's courage to be the voice to solve challenges and create massive shifts in the community and schools is what fuels his enthusiasm for change, making a difference and saving lives. Rob's deepest passion is to help others build life skills that cultivate the power of resiliency and the ability to experience true joy and happiness, unafraid to finally live life to its fullest. Rob owns and operates a lifestyle gym called Eastman Fitness and Wellness, where he coaches youth and adults in the power of a healthy mind and body. Rob is a podcaster, influencer, wrestling coach, dirt biker, rock climber, skydiver, MMA fighter, and of course, proud father. Let's dive in. Trigger warning, this content is a personal testimony of Rob Eastman, which includes topics of mental health and suicide. If this is too sensitive of a subject for you, we encourage you to please not listen to this episode. If you're getting value from this content and want to be informed of new episodes as they're released, be sure to subscribe to the MHT newsletter using the link in the description below. There you will find also a lot of freebies that I've created for you around workbooks on anxiety, depression, productivity, and clinical interventions. All right, so let's go. Thank you so much, Rob, for making time to be on the Mental Health Toolbox video podcast today. Really appreciate it and excited to have you share your wisdom and truth with our audience.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Glad we could connect.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much. It's an honor. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you have to share in terms of coping skills and your history and your journey in mental health.
Yeah, that's a long one. I'll shorten it up a little bit. My book will be coming out next year, but
that's exciting.
I was born and raised in a little town called Bountiful, Utah, just outside of Salt Lake City. Very big population of LDS Mormon religion. I've got a few siblings. I've got a younger brother, 3 older sisters, my dad, mom. My dad was an only child. Mom had a sister, but my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I wouldn't say we were rich growing up, but we had, he worked really hard, and I'm a redhead for those that aren't seeing it. So if you understand that, I got a few extra gears in me. Yes. But as I've been going through my book, I talked to my mom kind of to recap those early years. And she said right out the womb, I had a really tough time sitting still. She'd have to soothe me to go to bed. And when she would finally get to bed, she'd wake up and I wouldn't be where she left me. And so I was just always going and that's all fine and dandy till you get to school and you need to be in structure. So very early into elementary school, I was on the radar of my teachers who back in the 80s had the ability to bully the kids. And that just kind of opened the door for the schoolyard bullies. They'd hear it in class and they'd do the same out in the playground. So from a very early age, I kind of like to call them survival skills. Nothing more than wanting to fit in. And when people are telling you you're stupid and ugly and making fun of you all the time, and that I couldn't understand that. Clearly we didn't have the coping skills at 6 years old, 7 years old.
Right.
And that's kind of when I first started wearing masks. I'm like, well, they like this kid, maybe I should act more like that. Or he wears this, maybe I should wear that. And, I didn't know how to express my emotions. So I'd go home and end up bullying my little brother or take it out on my mom. I didn't let them know I was hurting. I just went and hurt them, which kind of created these areas that I was getting in trouble at home. I was getting in trouble at school. And in my religion, at the age of 8, you get baptized. And so I'm going to church and all these people tell me that my life's going to be amazing, that this is what needs to happen. And in my little mind, it meant that I was going to be able to sit still in class, that I was going to be good at math, that I was going to be popular. And so I can remember that day just going in, just so excited for my life to change, and going back to school on Monday and finding that wasn't the case. And for me, growing up in that belief system, that was kind of the first time that I started waging a war with God, with the adults in my life, that you told me it was this and it really didn't happen.
Disillusion.
So, yeah. And I didn't know what to do. And it was in the 3rd grade that I developed my first suicidal thoughts. I didn't know that I could actually kill myself. I just knew I just didn't want to be around anymore. And by what happened at school and the chaos that I caused at home, I just felt like everybody would be better off if I wasn't. It was like I was doing them a favor. So that just created. What was that?
So kind of feel like a burden.
Yeah.
The message you were getting.
I couldn't sit still. It didn't matter what I did. I couldn't sit still like everybody else. I didn't learn like everybody else. If I was reading, it was for you. I wasn't retaining anything. And again, when you're little, you want to be picked first for the team. You want to be included at lunch. You want to be in all those things. I think I had so much energy that I just wore people out. But I knew that every day when I was getting ready to go to school, all that anxiety would kick up, and that most of those pain and anger came from the kids at school. So I was like, you know what? I don't care how big they are. I'm just going to start fighting back. And kind of became the bully killer. I was the smallest kid on the playground, but they called me the Tasmanian Devil. I was a little wild man, and I figured, if they're going to pick on me, it's going to be really hard on them. And so, I just trying to figure out who I was and going through the motions of junior high. I just got really good at being whatever you needed me to be. And which, when you put on a show all day, you go home and you're pretty exhausted.
It's gotta be exhausting.
Yeah. So moving into junior high, the only thing I ever had was athletics. My parents loved me. They got to the point in school, they said, if they don't get me figured out, that they're going to have to hold me back. So I was in and out of the doctor's offices. I was on Ritalin before it was a thing. And again, one of my teachers pulled me up in front of the class and said, why can't you sit still like everybody else? Take your pill and sit down. And the whole class erupted in laughter. Right. And I was like, well, they probably wouldn't laugh if they had to take medication.
Right.
So I'm not going to take medication. So trying to manage your mental health at 11, 12, after something like that, it just got to be pretty chaotic, lying to my parents, saying, yes, I took my meds. Yes. Hiding them under my tongue, whatever it is. And got into junior high, and the bullying continued. And ultimately I became what I hated most. I became the bully, just in pain all the time. Yeah. And, again, I had sports. I was a starting point guard on the basketball team. Took second place in district for the wrestling team. And I felt great while I was, somebody was filling my cup with cheers, but as soon as that was done, I was empty again. I was definitely looking outward to be liked, to be loved, and this was mostly outside of the home, because at home, my mom, she loved the crap out of me. She went to the ends of hell, which, looking back now, we have a saying that she probably almost loved me to death. She coddled me. She took care of me so much that I was never really forced to sit in the pain and understand it. And going
Things like
through high
that
school
affected your ability to self-soothe to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I just knew that if I threw a big enough tantrum or whatever, my mom would come save me, and that's how I expressed my pain. I wasn't taught at a young age how to express my emotions, because I don't know if it's a redhead thing or what, but we go from A to Z real quick and see red quite often. And, almost so much emotion, it was almost like a blackout. And again, in my religion, we don't drink, we don't smoke, none of those things. So that was kind of like the one thing that I was holding on to. But it got to ninth grade when finally my girlfriend dumped me, and I had my first suicide attempt. I ended up pulling the trigger on a revolver a couple times, and some friends grabbed me and they called the police and took me home. And this is at the age of like probably 14. And my dad pulled me into the garage and smashed the gun up with a sledgehammer. And he's like, "Do you know why you don't have grandparents?" And I was like, "No." I didn't even know what a grandparent was. We didn't have any. And he told me his dad drove his truck off of a bridge and his mother committed suicide a year later. That if I were to hurt myself, he doesn't know what he would do. He might hurt himself. And then that internal, like, I love my dad. I don't want my dad to hurt. So,
gave you a why.
Yeah. So now it's like, at a certain point, you can only handle so much emotional pain. So that's when drugs and alcohol started looking like my only option. And the first time I smoked weed, it was like, man, my pain went away. All these people that I'm with are so loving and caring. And so I thought that was the answer. And, one thing they don't tell you is that it'll never be the same as it was the first time. And that no matter how much you smoke, no matter how much you drink, no matter how many pills you take, that pain is still waiting for you when you sober up. So as we know how addiction goes, you just never sober up. And that went on for about 18 years of addiction, and letting people down, getting divorced, losing jobs. My dad he owned car dealerships. He was a school board president. He was the majority whip in the state Senate, killing it, right? And my mom's on all these things, and I'm over here just blowing it up. He's setting laws, I'm breaking them. Making the news for the wrong reasons, and it just didn't matter what I did. I just felt like I couldn't handle the pressures anymore, and started losing friends to addiction. And, they sent me off to a couple different rehabs. Between 18 and 27, I ended up going to 3 rehabs, married and divorced twice, and just had pretty much blown up every opportunity I could. And I ended up getting married before that last relapse and had a baby. She's 7 months old. I got married in a temple. And so when I relapsed, it's like when you go to rehab, they give you all these amazing tools, right? You make amends, you right your wrongs, all these things. And I did all of that. But the one relationship I didn't work on was my relationship with pain. And so I was playing soccer and I blew my ACL. And so in recovery, I'm like 2 years into recovery, and I've got this plan. And I didn't know that reintroduction of medication to my system was going to do what it did. And I definitely didn't plan on, when that nerve block wore off the second day, it was like I hadn't been sober at all.
Oh, really?
I picked up the phone, called my drug dealer I hadn't talked to in 2 years, same number, same guy, boom, needle in my arm. And now I'm carrying this. I'm a big recovery guy. What if people knew? I just got married in the temple. What's God going to think of me now? What is my wife going to say? What are my parents going to say? And made it pretty easy not to say anything, So I just white knuckled and stayed relapsed for about 9 months. And at this time, my daughter had been born, and I'm trying to maintain and I'm really honestly trying to get better. but that hook, that pain, that shame and doubt just kept fighting through. And it got to the point where my wife knew that I was a harm to myself and everybody around me. And so she packed up and she left. And at that time, I couldn't really afford to keep the house that I had built. I owned a concrete company at the time, and I got to the point where my philosophy was I couldn't go to work unless I was high, and then I'd get so high I couldn't go to work. And ended up back on my parents' couch. And that lasted for maybe a month until one morning my dad came down and he was crying and handed me a piece of paper. And I started reading it, and my mom and dad had stayed up the night before and wrote my obituary.
Oh,
They
wow.
said, we know you're going to die, but you're not going to do it in our basement. You need to go. And I ended up being homeless out of pride for about 10 days, 2 weeks. And at that point, I knew that something needed to happen. And in my mind, that meant me finally killing myself. So the only way I could see my daughters if my parents were there. And so I set an appointment to go meet them at their house, and went up and hugged my daughter, who was 7 months at the time, and told my mom I loved her, and hugged my dad. And on my way out, I stole a gun and went up in the mountains. And for me, after 2 decades, and really ever since I was a little kid, finding that war with a higher power, or whatever you want to call it, negative energy, really doesn't matter to me, but I didn't know if anybody was listening. I didn't know if I'd been forgot about. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was I couldn't do it anymore. And so I knelt down and I put the gun in my mouth, and I had these visions of my daughter and my mom. And in rehab, they teach you to do a pros and cons list, right? Weigh the options, play the tape to the end. And I'm thinking of my daughter, like, if I'm gone, I'll never embarrass her. I'll never let her down. Any man could come into her life and be a better father than me. And so that went away pretty quick. And then my mom, she's a real God-loving woman. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pray to her God so that when he doesn't answer my prayer, when she dies, she can go look him in the face and say, you failed me. I was pretty pissed at the time. And I knelt down and I said a prayer, and I said, I don't know anything about a still small voice. I'm going to need something a little bit louder than that. And if I don't get a sign by the time I wake up or open my eyes, I'm pulling the trigger. And that was August 31st, 2009. And right as I went to open my eyes and I started squeezing that trigger, firework display went off up in the mountains, just from the houses below where I was. And shortly after that, I heard a voice and it said, is that loud enough?
Oh, wow.
And I was paralyzed. And at that point, I didn't believe, I didn't know if there was a God. I don't know if I even believed in it, but I definitely couldn't deny what just happened. And so it took me about 20 minutes to be able to even move. I was so scared. I did not know what the heck just happened. I'm blubbering, face down in the dirt, and picked myself up. I went down to my parents' house, told them what I just attempted, and I drove myself straight to the hospital and checked myself in. And that was my last go at rehab. And my sobriety date is September 1st, 2009. And everybody tells you if you get in recovery, life's going to be amazing. And on my way home from rehab, after the 60-day stint, my wife let me know that we were divorced. 2 weeks later, the bank came and took everything, because this time when my parents said we're done, they actually meant it. So if you don't pay your bills, if they don't pay your bills for 90 days, the bank comes and takes things. And then at 9 months sober, my dad passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what more? I'm doing everything that everybody says, and I'm having this conversation with whoever the heck is listening. And I'm like, you know what? If there's a heaven, my dad's definitely there. And if he's there, he's probably running the show. So I just started praying to my dad, and, just wandered through, spent a lot of time in AA. My mom gave me the tough love, so I didn't have money for a therapist. So I got a Pell Grant from the government, and I went back and I studied only psychology. And I fell in love with it. So I started combining the only two things, my newfound love, which was psychology, and fitness. So I'm training people for free at the park, at schools, anybody that would listen. I wanted to share this new burning desire in my heart. And it turned into 1 or 2 people, into 10 people, into people wanting to actually pay me, but not wanting to do the crazy, like Navy SEAL style training I was doing. So about 4 years in, I asked my mom if I could use her basement. And the year before that, she said, no, but you can use my yard. And we live in Utah, so half the year is covered in snow. Right. So I was out there snow blowing her grass so that we had a place to train out in the winter snow. And that's all real. I had to my name.
It's dedication.
Yeah, we were, I ended up running like 13 ultra marathons. I was ranked in the world in obstacle racing, not because I love running, but because when you're 25 miles into the mountains and you still have 25 miles to get out and nobody's coming to save you, you learn something about yourself.
I can imagine.
That was kind of my MOs. I had to learn the hard way, and I started doing it on purpose. And the only thing I had of any value, like I went from owning a concrete company, making $35,000 a month, to working for $10 an hour, government assisted living, food stamps, like full switch. And the only thing that I kept that was worth any money, my dad bought me a Submariner Rolex for graduating high school. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, would my dad want me to keep this watch, or would he want me to chase my dream? And it came to the point where I ended up selling it. I bought a bunch of rubber horse stall mats, AKA a gym floor. Right. And my mom agreed to let me use a little basement workout room in her house. And I started sharing my philosophies and training people. And that blew up to where I'm making like $6,000 a month in my mom's basement. And I've started to face all of my fears. That was one of my big things. So as a kid who was bullied, I learned how to act really tough, but I wasn't really tough, in hopes that it would scare people away and find an easier, softer pick. So I'm sitting there at 35 years old, and I ended up taking a cage fight off of Facebook. And 3 weeks later, got in the cage and started training. And what I thought I was going to do is, I was pretty angry, right? Everything had left, my wife, I'm riding the bus type of stuff. And I thought I was going to get trained to be this badass killer, mean guy. And what I found was honor and discipline and camaraderie and respect. It's like the deadlier I became, the calmer I was, because now I could make decisions out of confidence and not out of fear. And that led me on a 10-year journey of jiu-jitsu and MMA and boxing. But I started putting commercials on the TV during the fights about recovery coaching and life coaching and my gym. And I had started this gym called Eastman Fitness. And all of a sudden, I'm getting all these collect calls. And they're like, this is the prison. Will you accept the collect call? I'm like, I guess. And they were airing my fights at the prison. But these guys were seeing that I fought, but I was also in recovery. So they're like, Coach, when I get out of here, I want to come train with you.
Wow.
So I went from being this little small town guy to now I'm transitioning guys out of prison.
You just can't plan that stuff, huh?
No, what I thought I was going to do and what I actually am doing now is
the way life works.
Spectrums. Yeah. So as these guys are coming, in my mind, my mom's basement is my gym, right? I've gotten so comfortable walking old ladies or whoever through. Now I've got these guys that are convicted felons, attempted murderers, and things, gang members, and I'm walking them through my mom's kitchen. There's 2 of them, and I'm walking them through my mom's kitchen. She's over there making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, I look at these dudes that I've never met until that moment. And then I'm looking at my mom going, I probably got to do something different here.
Time for my own gym.
Yeah. And it's all those things like that brought up another insecurity and fear because I'd failed my entire life. So that was just like that next transition of, you know what, as things come, you got to face them. You got to stand and fight. You got to handle them as they come, or if you let them go long enough. anxiety can be a pretty big deal. So I went out and I signed a 1-year lease on a place. I didn't dare do any more than that. And started transitioning guys and ended up getting married. And my stepson was playing baseball, and that was pretty boring compared to MMA. So I said, hey, buddy, I'll help coach whatever you want to do, but let's pick a different sport. And he chose wrestling. And so I went to his junior high school and volunteered, and I walked through the door and they're like, whoa, you got to have a background check. You can't just come in here. I was like, okay, no problem. I'm like 4 years sober. And I go in and I get fingerprinted, and they tell me that I'll hear back within the next 2 weeks and I can start coaching. I'm like, right on. The very next day, I get an email that says, thanks, but no thanks, with a copy of my background. And it's like 3 pages of all of the stuff. I never got convicted of anything, but I got arrested a lot. And so 4 years sober, doing well in business, all these things, and that one letter made me feel about this big again.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
And I'm like all insecure and feeling sorry for myself and judged. And then that was like all those tools that I built up over those 4 years was like, it came back within a couple minutes, was like, no, if you were the other guy on the other end of that letter, you would say no too. Don't be the letter. So I set an appointment. I took that background check in. I pushed it across the table and said, where would you like to start? He got this really uncomfortable look on his face. And I started sharing my story. And by the end of it, he was teary-eyed, stamped it approved, and said, we need more coaches like you.
Wow.
10 years later, I'm the head coach of a high school. I'm the head coach of a junior high school. And we obviously teach wrestling, but 198% of what we really do is mental health. I wish somebody would have told me what was really coming down the pipeline. I wish somebody would have told me that it was okay to cry as a man and that you needed a solution when you were done. So many people talk about the problem and they continue talking about the problem, but they never come up with a solution. So every time you step foot in my room, we talk about how we're feeling. We talk about solutions to feel better, and then we hit the mat. And my kids, now boys and girls, can wrestle. They know that it's okay for them to come in and have a bad day, that they're not going to get in trouble for being honest and vulnerable. There's no bullies in the room because, our parents, I don't know where you live, but here everything is amazing, right? If you just do this, everything's going to work out. Marriage, it's going to be amazing. You're going to have the house, you're going to have the kids. It's going to be wonderful. That was the biggest lie ever. It was the hardest thing I ever did.
A lot of empty promises.
It didn't work out. Yeah. So it's not about, we try not to save anybody from anything, but we'll sit next to you and cry with you. And we'll talk about how it affected us and what we did differently to change it. And so I went from working with adult addicts and mental illness to prevention with the youth. And then I had another aha moment that it's really cool helping people turn their light on and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. It's really cool seeing kids strive and chase their dreams. What's not cool is when the kids go home and get re-indoctrinated into what messed them up in the first place, or vice versa. So then I knew, you know what, I got to work with everybody. So I just created another company that's called The Village Effect, where we go into a home, we're consultants, we're therapy, we're whatever that family needs in their own home, understanding boundaries, understanding that being a good parent doesn't mean wearing every single hat. It's okay if you need to work and you suck at being a stay-at-home mom. Go get a job so when you come home, you look forward to seeing your kids and you're not screaming at them all day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And pulling those layers back to know that it's okay for somebody else to coach a kid. It's okay for somebody else to teach your kid a new lesson, to hold them accountable. And so in my state, in my town, we're trying to just scream from the rooftops about mental health and how important it is. We have so much testing. There's really no life skills classes anymore in our schools. So everything is testing, math, English, science. And it's like, okay, your kids are studying all this stuff. How much time do they spend studying themselves? How much time do they know what's really going on internally and how to solve that problem? We had 8 suicides in young men under the age of 13 over the last 6 months. That's a problem. Something is broken. So, what can we do as mental health people or grown men or families? It's like, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing your fails with your neighbors, with your family, being vulnerable, being approachable, and letting everybody find and work through it in their own way. And ultimately moving forward that way. There's so much pressure, and it's like, I have a podcast where I talked to one of the family members, like, how important is math now? You know, they're like, I pressured him so hard to get good grades, and now he's gone. You know, it's like, we got to care more about the individual, and then everything else comes secondary. You know, half these kids aren't even making it to college, and the ROI on college isn't what it used to be, unless you want to be a doctor, therapist, or whatever. These trades are amazing. Kids can go out and make $1 million on a crypto miner, right? Like, the world has changed, and
yeah, absolutely.
Parents are constantly crying about technology or all of these things. It's like, the kids don't need the update. The parents need the update. We are living in a world we don't understand. Kids are living in a world that they were born into. And that gap, we've got to bring that a little bit, bridge that gap. So like I said, I own a gym, and then I've got a nonprofit that we work with families in crisis dealing with suicide attempts, addiction, life skills, work with the police departments, fire departments on better handling mental health calls, guns down, more understanding that it's a sickness and they don't need to be bullied even more. They just need to be understood and heard. It just, of the 13 years I've been doing this, I just know that there's not a single family that's not affected by it.
Absolutely. And it really sounds like you've come full circle. Instead of fleeing the environment, you've changed the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. You've literally stuck, you dug your heels in your grassroots, and you have changed the conversation. You've changed the environment from the inside out. Right. Ripple effect.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt bad. Like, it would have been way easier to like move to California or something, to not have to face what my father had built that I had gone behind him and just burnt down. But I felt that it was necessary for me to stay and clean up my mess. And that didn't mean being perfect. That meant being imperfect in public, owning it, vulnerable, and then also being strong and showing what a man can be. I'm covered from head to toe in tattoos, and I did not get them in prison, never been to prison, but something happens when I go to a school and I get on stage and these kids see me and they see me cry when I talk about my dad and my daughter, and it allows them to be vulnerable. They're like, if that dude can do it, maybe I can too. Maybe that's not a weakness. Using it not as attention-seeking behavior, but as a release valve, like a tea kettle. It whistles when it's hot. Like, when I'm fed up, I got to cry. If I don't let it out, it's going to come out at a really inopportune time, and usually out on somebody that I love. So if we learn to get rid of things on a daily basis, the world would be a lot better place.
Yeah. Amen to that. Absolutely.
So, I just feel some days it's a blessing and a curse, but the one thing I try and do is that when I'm prompted or when I'm shown something, that I take action. And it's not always an amazing thing, but for the most part, I want to be known for giving back and not the drug addict that I thought I was worthless and the world would be better off without me.
Wow, that is such a phenomenal story. And I know we're just scratching the surface in your summary here, but it's just I really, really just appreciate the work you're doing and using your lived experience as a testimony for those who, like you said, who are just starting off and are unsure and don't have anyone giving them permission to be authentic and be themselves, right? As well as changing the conversation and just helping to educate. I think when you touched on being approachable, that is so important, right? Especially for youth, to see adults being approachable and transparent, like you said, owning their behavior and letting them know it's okay. This is not about being perfect. Life is messy. Like, it's a play as you go thing. And when you talked about anxiety and the unexpected, and this life is this ebb and this flow, and when we think we have things dialed in, that's just when life throws us a curveball. And if we analyze it to death, we're not going to get anything done. We just get more afraid, right, about all the what ifs. Whereas if we take imperfect action and trust the process and just be consistent and focus on what we have control over, our action, not the outcomes, right?
Yeah, that's a big one in my gym, in the wrestling rooms, in my life, is you win or you learn. It's that simple. And if you're not learning, it's because you're not paying attention. So we try and teach people how to have a bad moment, not a bad week, not a bad year. It's like, if you had a bad year, it's because you are not listening to what life is trying to tell you, So it's just one of those things that, clearly when I'm an addict, would never be of service. That's the last thing, but now it's something that I would do if I was homeless or a billionaire. This is not, it happens to be my job, but it is something that it's deeply rooted into me not wanting people to have to go through the same thing, or at least be uneducated as they do go through it. Because a lot of it is that it's a scary subject. People they get really awkward when you go to talk about it. It's like, I'll be doing a speech somewhere and I'll invite people, and it's funny to see the different reactions. Like, hey, I'm doing a mental health speech at the high school. You should come. And they're like, well, I don't need that. It's like, I am not saying you're struggling. I'm saying come support me. But when they hear that, it's like, look, like, not me. I've got it all together. It's like, that's exhausting, having it all together all the time, because I don't. And I'm a mental health coach, so it's such a scary thing. And one of the first questions I ask when I get there is, how many of you personally struggle or know somebody who struggles with mental health, anxiety, depression, self-harm, etc.? Stand up. The whole room, every butt out of the seat. And I say, now look around. And they look around. They're like, oh my gosh, that's the connection. Now, stay standing if you feel comfortable talking about that. The whole room sits down. Maybe 5 or 6 of the tough guys that have been through some stuff will stay standing. But that's the exact reason why it's so scary. We all experience it, but nobody wants to talk about it. That's terrifying.
That's the stigma.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I want to crush. The devil better put on some armor every morning when I wake up, because I'm coming hard.
Love it. Yeah.
It's I want to even the playing field, and obviously I'm not enough, and we need men and women like yourself doing this, and we need it on every corner. And in my area, I have to remind people sometimes that church is a hospital for the sick and not a museum for the rich. And that is a place where people, if they are struggling, that's the first place they should go, right? Not be shunned at the door because they smell like smoke or because they've been drinking or whatever. And I've just gotten to the point where I don't care what it is, man. If yoga makes you a better person, do that. If meditation makes you a better person, do that. If going to church, do that. But we've gotten to a place where people are spending more time retaliating or throwing hate or whatever, and it's because they're hurt. And I would just like everybody to share what makes them a better person. Because when people ask me, well, what do you believe in? I'm like, and I don't know, do you guys have Chuckarama?
Chakarama? I don't know what that is.
You have a buffet.
Yes.
So Chuckarama's our buffet. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I got Buddha on this arm. I got a cross on this arm. Sometimes I pray to my dad. Sometimes I meditate. Sometimes I go to an Indian sweat. Sometimes I do ice baths. I have a lot of different tools I need because some days I don't want to talk to God.
Mm-hmm.
Some days I want to slap him. I always tell him, I said, I hope there's jujitsu in heaven because I'm choking you. And I've got to do what makes me better. I don't want to spend time trying to fit in. I need to do constantly things that I know are going to drive me to my moral compass.
Absolutely. And I think going back to the whole idea of judgment we were talking about, right? When people feel judged, it robs them, it puts them on the defensive. Plus then it robs them of that freedom that comes with being authentic themselves. Like you said, when you support somebody and doing whatever it is that they need to do to feel grounded and centered and from a place of praise and encouragement, as opposed to judgment, people thrive. Yeah. Right? People thrive when they're allowed to do them, be supported for it.
Did you happen to read Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Light?
I have it. I'm in the process.
So there's just one part in there that I was like, that blew my mind. And he was like in Africa, and these two guys were his guides or something, were arguing. And they were like talking back and forth, and Matthew McConaughey hops in and says, well, this guy's right. And the guy that he was backing turned around and said, you know what's wrong with you? You Americans, you guys are always arguing to be right or wrong. You're not arguing to understand. And I was like, how often are we like, no, that's not it. This is it. Like whatever somebody else thinks, it has nothing to do with us. Mm-hmm. Hear them, see how they think it will better help you communicate and deal with them. It's not about proving right or wrong. That's exhausting too. Right. But now it really made me sit back and be like, you know what? Your opinion, what makes you do this or do that, it doesn't hurt or harm me at all. But it really helps me understand where you're coming from. So I've really tried to shut up. You probably can't tell by me talking, but to just see and, body language and the way people's brains work, and it allows me to help them better because it's not about me, it's about them. And I think there's so many people, this is the right religion, this is true church, this is this, and there's so much of that going on. It's like, for me, I'm like, it's so simple. Does it make you happy? Does this group of friends make you better or worse? Does this substance make you better or worse? Does this job make you better or worse? How do you feel on Sunday when you're going to that job? Like, if people just paused and let go of that societal carrot that you're supposed to be A, B, C, and D, and just truly shared their genius and their love and their service, man, they'd be so much happier.
That's so true. It's so true. And I can tell just by the way your vernacular and the way you talk and your life experience that you are a reader, because everything that's all the truth you're speaking is everything I've heard from all of my favorite self-help books and words of wisdom about how human behavior. And obviously you studied psychology, and yes to all of it. That's fantastic.
I met Eric Thomas a few years ago, and he reminded me, he's like, you'll never be the best copycat. Mm-hmm. And that hit me so hard. And it was like, you know what? I'm going to put all this time and effort into just sharpening my tools. Mm-hmm. I don't need to dress like that dude. I don't need to sound like that guy. I need to go off of what I know to be true, which is a lot. I made a lot of bad mistakes and know that I don't want to be on that side. And the rest of it just comes with looking at what I suck at. And do I even care if I'm good at it? It's like a few things, like mowing my lawn. The time it takes me to do that, the attitude that it puts me in, it's way easier to pay the young kid that's starting a new business at 14, pay him $30 to do it, and let me go do what I love.
Absolutely.
I don't want to clean my house. So I'll pay somebody, give them an opportunity to come in and make some money for their family and do that. And that allows me hours to put into what I do love. Mm-hmm. I don't get spread thin. People are like, how do you do all the stuff that you do? I was like, I don't even feel like I'm working.
Yeah.
I love my people.
If you love what you do, it's a vacation. It's not so much a vocation. Right?
Yeah. It's like, I don't mind weekends, but that's when my schedule and structure goes to just whatever. And I struggle in that. But Monday, boy, I'm pumped. I get to see my friends, which are AKA my clients, get to go lift at my gym, get to be around kids. Like my summer camp just started today. These little kids getting up, it's the summer. They're getting up at 7 a.m. or they're not getting up. They're at my gym at 7 a.m. ready to bust their butt. Yes or no, sir. Like, that's impressive. You know, I'm going to get like, gives me the chills to think that like, there's just so much when you push people to challenge themselves. Like, we're in so much competition. That's one of the conversations I had today was like, look to the right, look to the left. And they're all looking around. You are not in competition with any of them. Only the person looking back in the mirror. If you're the last one back from the mile, guess what? Mark your time. And I promise you it'll be better by the end of the summer. And that goes for work, relationships. Like, how many people do we know that get in a relationship, it goes terrible, and before they do anything, they're right back in another one blaming the other guy. Like,
or they just set it to autopilot, right?
Yeah. You know, and it's like, we're just leaving bonfires. And then you get to be my age and you're like, man, I was the common denominator in every single one of those terrible relationships. Maybe I should call and apologize. It's like my 20-year reunion was spent being like, sorry, because I didn't want to carry that, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe that's selfish, that it really wasn't even about them, but I know how it made me feel, what I did to them, whether it be a bully or mistreated a girl or whatever. It's like, at 40, knowing what it felt like to be bullied at 7, it sticks with people. So I don't want to be that guy, you know? So correcting my fails, owning my mistakes, trying not to commit them again is a big deal to me. And I tell people all the time, it's like, you can do all these things, but you got to carry your burdens to bed. You got to sleep at night. And as long as you're a kind and loving person, you will never be homeless, because you'll always have somebody who cares about you enough to let you crash on their couch. And that's good enough for me. You know, I'm way beyond.
Give the world better than we found it, right?
Yeah. And people just think, well, I'm going to do better moving forward. It's like, it kind of helps to say sorry. Yeah. A lot of people get stuck in their throat. They're like, so they just can't do it. And it's, you know, it's so, it's such a good feeling to be able to see it for your own sake. And then see what it does to the other people, just to be recognized as, you know what, he's really trying. I'm going to try harder too.
Yeah. Validation goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I really, really appreciate, again, you sharing and being so raw, you know, today, and your story and the struggles you went through. And I know you drive by those incidents of suicidal ideation and the bullying and the drug addiction, and we could deep dive to any one of those chapters of your life and spend literally countless hours, you know, mulling through it. But I know, you know, the work you're doing is so meaningful, and it comes from that place of taking imperfect action and improving and measuring yourself and those mile markers of recovery, and having that why, like you say, that passion behind what you're doing, regardless of this, whether you're rich or homeless, you would do this because you love it, because it's meaningful, and it is your recovery, and you understand the value in the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's everything. And I really appreciate you sharing that testimony today. You know.
Yeah, I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity and the platform. I think this is one thing that people don't understand too, is how much time and effort goes into putting on a podcast, keeping it going. And so thank you for being one of the guides and people to allow others to share their story.
Oh, my pleasure. And yes, there is a lot of back end to it, but again, it's what I love. So I would do this, you know, regardless. So much appreciated. Wouldn't work without you. So obviously everyone listening is chomping at the bit to learn more about you, right? Where can they go to find out? I believe you said you have a website, a podcast. I'm sure you're on social.
So where I do most of my social media is on Instagram, and I'm the Tattooed Life Coach and the number 8. And then my website is EASTMONFitnessUtah.com. Don't let the fitness fool you. It's all about fitness is just a easy tool for me to use to teach people how to do hard things in a safe environment.
I can see that. Love it.
And then my podcast is called Stand and Fight. And that's just centered around all the tough conversations, co-parenting, suicide. Man, there's a little bit of everything on there. A lot of addiction recovery stories, some cool people, and just trying to let everybody know that no matter what you've done, there's probably 5 people on your street that have done the same thing, and you shouldn't carry the shame. You should share the story and the solution. And that's just what's important to me is, I'll never be perfect. And like you were saying earlier, it's like I've learned that I'm on a journey and that I will never arrive, because every time I feel that I've arrived, God's like, whoosh, he slaps me off my pedestal. And then I'm like, man, why didn't I learn this time? So anytime I feel like I'm getting to a really good spot, I know it's my higher power saying, you know what, take your shoes off, get a breath, get a meal, because the next mountain is going to be even steeper. So it allows me to just reflect, appreciate, and count my blessings, and then get ready for war again.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. Absolutely. And we'll definitely link up to all of your contact information. The podcast sounds fantastic. And I think, again, people really need to see that they're not alone. In this mess
that's
of life.
ultimately the key, is that your secret isn't really a secret, because everybody's holding something very similar. Absolutely. So got that saying, your secrets keep you sick.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Get them out. And then the others on Facebook is just Rob Eastman. So, excellent. And then I answer everybody's message if they're struggling or need help or resources or whatever. We consult definitely in the surrounding states of Utah, but we've got people all over the country that we interact with and can get help. So
fantastic. I just look forward to your growth and continuing to see what the work you're doing thrive and flourish, because it's definitely needed. You're providing an invaluable service.
So awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, would it be okay if I had you back on later down the road? See how things are.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, once my book's out and cranking, we'll come back on. I can share a little bit about that. So I'd love to.
Yes, just reach out. Let me know. I'll be more than happy to have you back on. Excited.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you and this time.
Me too. Me as well. Thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate your time.
Yep.
Well, there you have it. Another tool to help you thrive. Hey, if you're getting value from this content and you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and, of course, on the podcasts wherever you listen. And if you're getting value, of course, please do share with your friends and family. All right? So until next time, keep making good things happen and have a great day. Bye-bye.